Shalom, everyone. It is great to see everyone and great to have you on this very, very special special class. We witnessed a terrible tragedy last week, and it has elicited such profound reactions. I wanted to experience that in some way with everyone. And I felt that there was no better way to do this than to call up really my good friend and great tour guide, Moshe Gold. Moshe knows Israel backwards, forwards, sideways, upside down in every way possible. And the idea was that if we would have been in Israel around this time, which may have been likely, I would have turned to Moshe at breakfast and say, Moshe, we got to get there. We got to see what's going on. We got to see with our own eyes what this is about, what happened there. And not only that, but we need to explore, I think, this very, very important moment, what it means for Israel, and what it discloses in terms of the evolving relationship between the fastest growing sector of Israeli population, the Haredi society, and the rest of Israel. And of course, how this will percolate to the rest of the Jewish world. So there's so many dimensions to our journey this morning, and I want to turn it over to Moshe Gold. It's so great to see you and to have you here, and we are going to start right now. Go ahead, Moshe.
Okay, toda rabba, boker tov, everyone. Good to see you all again. It's 5:33 here, 5:33 p.m. here in Yerushalayim, and we're going to be going up north. And just like as Rabbi was saying, we'll try and jump in to that issue of Meron, Haredi society, pilgrimage to holy sites, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai, proximity to the city of Tzfat, all those things together. And of course, how does Israeli society and the Jewish world feel after Thursday night, after Friday a.m., when the results of Lag BaOmer came out with 45 deaths of people that were up in the kever, the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But before we do that, please allow me to just throw half a minute of what's happening today in Israel, because I think it's very, very important. And maybe it's part of the whole picture. Because you know how there's a pasuk in the book of Judges in Shoftim, Bayamim Haem, Ein Melech BeYisrael. In those days, there's no king in Israel, right? Ish hayashar be'inav yaseh. Everybody does what they want to do. There's no law. Nobody's enforcing the law. So maybe that's a little bit exaggerating, but today is the last day of Benjamin Netanyahu trying to form a government. It could be that he'll form a government until, in the next 6 hours from now. That's he has 6.5 more hours. He was given a few weeks by the president a few weeks ago after the elections to try and form a government. If that doesn't succeed, a different leader will probably get that right from the president to try and form a government. My point is the following. For the past 2.5 years, we already had 4 different elections. What did we not have? We didn't have seder. We didn't have order. We didn't have a government that is really functioning. In a time like Corona, COVID, in a time of so many challenges with the different parts of society, especially during COVID, this is even a bigger challenge, right? Not having a steady government is a problem, no matter if it's right-wing, left-wing, centrist. We need a king, we need a government, we need a king like in the time of Judges, we need a government, we need stability. And I think it doesn't matter in Israel if you're right-wing or left-wing or centrist, whatever you are, people don't want to go and vote for the 5th time in under 3 years. It's a waste of money, it's a waste of time, and it's continuing a situation that we're not happy about. If you're waiting for a law to come out, a new law to be legislated, this is not a good time for you. If you're waiting for the rules of Israel, not only to be set, but to be enforced, this is not a good time for you, because the committees that get together weekly in the Knesset when there's a normal, steady government are not doing that right now. That's a huge issue when you talk about welfare about security. So you can hear this is a big issue. I'm sure you're following and you know about this situation, but this is a very dramatic day. Is Bibi going to succeed to form a government? Is it going to go to a different leader to try and create a government? Everybody's waiting to see. But on Thursday night, going back a few steps, we had probably the most severe, difficult tragedy, civil tragedy from the time of the history of the state of Israel. 73 years old we are, and we're walking with baby steps forward. But maybe this is also connected, what happened in Meron, to that idea of not having leadership, of not having a system, not having enforcement, doing things with two words in Hebrew, which are yeh beseder, yeh beseder. It will be okay, don't worry. There was a nes last year, there was a miracle last year. Many people are saying about Meron, there was a nes last year, a miracle, and nothing happened, even though it could have, because the situation was just as bad. Maybe there'll be a nes this year as well. So today we're going to get a chance to go up to that area right outside of Tzfat, just a little bit west of Tzfat. We'll look at the different areas in Israel where there's tzaddikim and where people make pilgrimage to come up to tzaddikim. We'll talk about this phenomena of visiting tzaddikim. Why do people come to the tzaddik? Why is it so important? And most importantly, who was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai? What was he doing up north? We know he passed on Lag BaOmer, right? On Yudchet Nisan, the 18th day of Nisan, on Lag BaOmer. But what is it that happens there every year up in Mount Meron? And of course, we're going to go in a little bit of detail into that Thursday night and Friday morning, what happened in Meron itself, and discuss different reactions in Israeli society to this terrible tragedy, which is still so much part of the everyday news. You turn on the radio, that's what people are talking about. We're not in a stage where we're giving critique. It's not about that. It's not saying, oh, they were wrong or they were wrong, this wasn't okay, but it's really like, still, I feel it's still shock. How did this really happen? Or maybe, wait, maybe not how did this happen, but how did this not happen before? If this is the system, it's a miracle that it didn't happen already. So without any further ado, and please, as always, I'm going to ask if you have any comments or questions, unmute yourself, or even better, write on chat, and I'll see it every now and then. But I will stop twice to hear comments and questions as well. We're going to move all the way. We're going to zoom in all the way.
I'll moderate the chat there. So.
He froze.
You did freeze. Moshe, are you with us? Oh, you like that. Everyone pause, please.
A bit different. There was on the radio for the past week. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. Rabbi, can you hear me?
Yeah, you were frozen for a while. So just just rewind for a bit.
Okay,
30-second rewind. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and I'm sorry if this happens every now and then. But if it does, don't worry, I'll always be coming back. I started saying that that this year there were less bonfires than other years. There's been a request because of COVID, but not only not to have as many fires, because the weather was very, very hot. And when there's hot wind and warm weather, especially where I live in a moshav right by Jerusalem, right under Yad Vashem, right under the Holocaust Museum, you know, there's a huge forest in those areas around Jerusalem and other areas too. So they asked people not to have fires this year, right? And that was interesting because some people went with that rule and with that request, and many others did not. What I want to do with you right now is I want to take you to a few different places in Israel to really focus on this subject of Meron, this idea of coming up to visit a grave of a tzaddik, which is what Meron is about. When you go to Meron, just outside of Tzfat, you're coming to visit one man, and that is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai, a sage, a tzaddik who lived in the 2nd century CE, about 1900 years ago. So we know, of course, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is not the first tzaddik. People came to the caves of the patriarchs even from the time of the 12 spies that were sent to Israel from the desert. One of them, Kalev ben Yefuneh, went to the cave of the patriarchs in Hebron, and he visited Abraham and Sarah, and that was supposed to be a big privilege for him to connect with his patriarchs. We have tens of thousands of Jews from all over the world that go to Rabbi Nachman of Breslov's tomb every year, especially in Rosh Hashanah. That's in the Ukraine. They even went this year during COVID and visit non-religious, religious, ultra-Orthodox Jews. And they're all going to the Ukraine on Rosh Hashanah because apparently the Rabbi Nachman said that you should come on Rosh Hashanah to visit him. And you should say a specific prayer called Hatikun HaKlali. If you do those two things, you will never go to Gehenom. You will only go to Gan Eden, right? You're never going to go to bad places. You will be taken care of if you follow Rabbi Nachman Breslev and you come and visit his tombstone. But when I guide in Morocco, we also visit Rabbi Chaim ben Diwan, who is in the eastern side of Morocco, right? In this green patch in eastern Morocco, this Kabbalic rabbi is buried. Every year, people come to Ben Diwan's Hilula. The word Hilula comes from the word Hallel. You know how we say Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, on the beginning of a month? So think of the word Hilula. Hey, Lamed, Lamed, right? So we're giving praise to who? What's the last letter in Hilula? God. Hey, we're giving praise to God, but really we're trying to connect to God through our connection, our physical connection, our visit of the tzaddik. So it's being online with God, and the router maybe is the tzaddik. We're online with God. The pipe to him is going to be the tzaddik that will pray for us. These days, if you go to Iran, to a city called Hemdad, you can also visit the tomb of Esther and Mordechai. Yes, that still exists there in Iran. So this is really not only in the land of Israel or in Morocco. And finally, when we come into Israel, I want to take you to one of the most famous places where people visit tzaddikim in the state of Israel, and that is a tzaddik called the Baba Sali. The Baba Sali was a great rabbi in Morocco. He was in an area by the Sahara Desert in eastern Morocco called Tafilat. He later on in his life made Aliyah to Israel. He's buried in a city near the Gaza Strip called Netivot. It's near Sderot. If you heard about Sderot, it's always getting rockets on it from Gaza. So that's where the Baba Sali is buried every year on his yahrzeit. Tens of thousands of people come to his tomb. What do they do there? What do you do when you visit a tzaddik? And this is exactly the same of what you'll do when you go to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron and Lag BaOmer. You'll have a good meal. You'll celebrate. You'll sing. You'll pray. You'll say different special Kabbalic prayers. And there's a connection here between the world of Kabbalah and this idea of visiting a tzaddik. We'll talk about that in a moment. And really, this is a time to make a connection with the rabbi, with the tzaddik, and to ask for something that you need, something that you want. If it's a husband or a wife or a baby or whatever it is in your life, you're going to go to Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes by Tiberias and ask Baal HaNes, the miracle man, Rabbi Meir, the miracle man, to help you with your physical or spiritual needs. And finally, we're up in the Galilee. The Galilee is totally filled. Look at the Sea of Galilee over here. Everything north of it is filled with kivrei tzaddikim. A kever is a tomb. So tombs of tzaddikim, of rabbis, of people connected to the time of the Bible. of Tanaim from the time of the Mishnah. They're all marked with different traditions up in the lower and especially the upper Galilee. In fact, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that we're going to right now is probably the most famous. Say that because other than the Western Wall, this is the most visited site in Israel. You wouldn't expect a grave site of a rabbi that passed 1900 years ago to be such a popular place for people to come to. Why is that? Why is it so important to the Haredi and specifically Hasidic world? So right by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, we have a man called Hillel. Hillel and Shammai, right? They had a lot of disputes. Hillel is buried just outside of Tzfat, very close to the burial place of importantly, I think the most famous Israeli site to go to for people that are not married and are looking for a shidduch is a place called Amuka. Amuka is in the middle of the forest, just north of Tzfat. Amuka is a place that you go to connect with Yonatan ben Uziel, who also gave commentary on the Navi and the Nevi'im. He has his own commentary. But Yonatan, to help you find a shidduch, to help you find someone to get married with. So all the time, every night, but especially during the yortzeit of Yonatan ben Uziel, people will come in the middle of the night to say prayers at Amuka in the middle of the forest. Finally, one moment. See, there's a little problem here. One moment. Finally, I will bring you. Can you hear me, Rabbi?
I can hear you, yes.
Oh, fantastic. Finally, I bring you to the kever of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and I'll use Google Earth to walk you around this beautiful area. There's a beautiful moshav on the left, those red roofs. On the top of the hill, it says Tomb of Yochanan. That's a different tomb. But here it says Kever Rashbi. Rashbi is an acronym of Resh, Shin, Bet, and Yud. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Him and his son Elazar are actually buried on the top of this hill. Beautiful, beautiful area, very close to Tzfat, just a few kilometers away. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived in the time of Rabbi Akiva. In fact, the famous Rabbi Akiva that we always talk about had 5 very important students. One of them was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Where did they study? They studied in the area of Tel Aviv of today in a city called Bnei Brak. His 5 students were learning from their Rabbi Akiva, right? Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, loved your friend, loved your peer like you love yourself. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was very much influenced by this. But I would say that there's 2 things in the character of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that were very, very strong. One, he was very much against the Roman rule. When he was part of a conversation in the year 149 CE, and he heard a different Jew, a rabbi, saying, you know, the Romans aren't so bad. They made roads for us. They have bathhouses. They have a water system. There's good hygiene. They did a lot of good things for this land. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, are you kidding me? Do you really think that? They're destroying our land. This is not their land. Everything they do, they're doing only for themselves. A rumor came out in the Galilee that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was saying this out loud against the Romans. The Romans.
We lost you there.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai sits in that cave with his son, covered with the dirt of the land of Israel. He doesn't put on his clothes until Shabbat every week because he doesn't want to get his clothes dirty. And what they do is they're learning Torah all day long. What are they eating? They're eating from this carob tree that you can see over here. There's still a carob tree till this day. And apparently there's a little spring. Where is this place that was the home for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai for 13 years, for him and his son, hiding from the Romans? It's right by Mount Meron, right in the center of the Upper Galilee, and it's in a village called Peki'im. Peki'im till this day is a village that has one Jewish family, it has Druze and it has Muslims, and also a few Christians, and they all live together somehow in peace. They're all citizens of Israel. Now, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is sitting in this cave, but the most important thing that he does, according to tradition, is he's writing a book called the Zohar. The Zohar is the most important and the largest part of the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah was written probably by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the 2nd century, specifically the Zohar. Many others will say that he did not write it, by the way. But the important part of all this is that when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai comes out of the cave, escaping from the Romans, his student is going to write things down. And more than 1,000 years later, in the 13th century, there's going to be people already publicizing some of the ideas of the Zohar in Spain and in Portugal. Remember, that was the golden age of Spain. In the 16th century, there's a rabbi in Tzfat, near where Rashbi is actually buried, that is teaching practical Kabbalah. You can change the world, right? It's not just an idea. Kabbalah is the essence of the Torah. It's the soul of the soul. It's the deepest of the 4 parts of the Torah. Really the simple and the hint and the midrash and the sod. The sod is the secret. And the Zohar, written by the Rashbi, says Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Lion Rabbi of Tzfat, is something that you can live by. Rabbi Isaac Luria and the rabbi after him, Rabbi Vital, are looking for the graves, the tombs of tzaddikim. They go there and they introduce this to the people around them, that the tzaddikim are you should visit them. You should make a connection with them. When you come to a tzaddik's grave, you should lie on his tombstone. People do that till this day. You should say a special prayer. In fact, they wrote special prayers in the 16th century, the golden age of Tzfat, for each one of these rabbis, and especially for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, that they saw in a way as one of the founders of the world of Kabbalah, the soul of the Torah, right? And that is a very, very important.
Moshe, we got the bandwidth issues.
Walk or they can you hear me?
Yeah, I think people need to stop their cameras. Maybe it's a bandwidth issue. So if people can pause their cameras, we'll get more bandwidth here. Go ahead.
Okay. Every year, this family from Tzfat called the Abu family, Ayin Bet Vav, Abu family, walk all the way from Tzfat to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's grave. So it's about 5 miles. They walk through the riverbed with a Sefer Torah. When they get up to the top of the mountain, they continue celebrating. Let's get an idea, a little bit of their celebration. I just want to make sure that you can hear the voice. Let me just make sure. Advanced, here we go, shared sound. And listen to the music. Tell me if you can hear it with a thumbs up.
You can hear, I can hear, yeah.
Singing about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you can hear the words Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but the words that were sung, he's hiding inside the cave from the Gzeirah, from the decrees of the Romans. He comes out and writes the Zohar, the main part of the Kabbalah, and they have this march every year. They had it this year on Thursday morning up to the mountain where not only a hilula takes place, not only the evening lighting of a fire, prayers and dancing, but during the day, the 3-year-olds do what? What's it called in Hebrew? It's called a chalakeh. And in the chalakeh, these young kids, 3 years old, 3 is the age when you start learning Torah, you go to the cheder and start learning the Aleph Bet, the Shema, repeating after your rabbi, your melamed at the cheder. And they cut off for the first time the hair of these young kids in a ceremony called the chalakeh. Now, other than the chalakeh, here's the main event. I'm not sure that you can hear.
Moshe, we lost you there.
Can you hear me right now?
Now we can hear you. Yeah, it seems to, when we have video, we have a problem, but go ahead. Go ahead. Moshe Gold.
No.
Now you're here. There you are.
There you are. Okay. I hope it's going to work. This is what it looked like on Thursday night. This is Toldot Aron, Hasidut, the Satmar Hasidut, and many other people with them celebrating Lag BaOmer on Thursday, just before midnight. The peak of this occasion is going to be the lighting of the menorah, the bonfire. Everybody's going to start dancing, so wait for it.
Sorry, we're having such a problem here, but Moshe. Here. Sorry, everyone. Moshe is. You back, Moshe?
Again, I am sorry about this.
Sorry. Moshe, it seems that when we play video, you lose your.
Yeah. We use the. Look at this. As the rabbi of Toldot Aron lighting the menorah, the bonfire, and the celebrations begin. This is around midnight. And what happens Immediately after that, unfortunately, is pretty much the terrible story of the tragedy. Please give me a thumbs up if you can see me. I only see like 4 people, so give me a thumbs
Yeah,
up if you can.
you're
Fantastic.
there.
This is what it looks like inside the tomb of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Just to give you an idea, I was looking for footage for it during the day, and you could see that it's a patch and a patch and a patch, just like in the old city, but not in a very orderly way. There's nobody really here taking care of this as one organization, which is probably part of the problem. What happened in the end of the lighting of the Medurah by the rabbi, the bonfire, you can see the blue tops, these like kippah shape, these domes. That's where Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is buried. Right over here, there's a few steps. This is a picture from the newspaper. On these steps, in this very, very narrow passage, thousands of people were trying to get out right after the dancing started. Some people wanted to continue dancing with Toldot Aaron, with these Chassidut, and some wanted to leave the area. And that's where the problem began. People fell down the steps, trampling each other. Unfortunately, this was a terrible, terrible, terrible situation where people were stuck. Panic that people were in, trying to escape, literally trying to escape this trap, this death trap, getting out from that happiest time of the year. And really for Hasidim, this is like the most important day of the year, maybe other than Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, but this is a day where you come to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you say thank you, you ask for whatever you need, you ask the tzaddik to pray for you, that your prayers will go directly to God. And minutes after lighting the fire and celebrating, dancing together, all of these Hasidim, minutes after, people are trying to leave. And when thousands of people leave from a small area, there were supposed to be 3 different exits. There was only 1. Why did that happen? Now, again, I'm not blaming anyone because we don't know all the facts yet, but there were supposed to be 3 different areas of exits. Only 1 was open. Is it the police's fault? Is it the rabbis that should have limited the number of people coming up to Meron, especially after COVID? Is it the politicians that were pressuring to have thousands and thousands of people come up to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's grave in a year where we just not really got through COVID, but we're getting out of COVID? All these people standing together without masks. Yes, it's in the open air. A very, very problematic situation. And I'm sure there's a lot of different answers of who is in charge. But what's sure is one word: balagan. It's a mess. There is no melech in Israel. There is no king. There is no leadership. There is no system and enforcement that can actually stop this. The only thing that could have stopped this terrible, terrible event would be another miracle like every year. You should know that this year there were 100,000 people that came up to Meron on Lag BaOmer. Usually it goes up to 500,000. So there were much less this year. This was just one of the bonfires, one of the hilulot that started by Toldot Aaron, but the circumstances of going out through one exit was actually terrible. And this was a few hours later when most of the people were already gone, and 45 people were already found. 150 others were injured and taken to the hospital. I hope you can still see me and hear me. This is a picture of the year 1920. This is not a new tradition, as I tried to convey to you before. Even from the time of Rabbi Isaac Luria in Tzfat, people were coming up to the Rashbi, asking for things, praying for things. Just like people go to Rabbi Nachman in Breslov, Ukraine today, hundreds of thousands of Jews from all over the world. This was the place to go to, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in Meron, and it still is for so many Jews. So this is a picture from 1920 from that same place. Looks a little bit different 100 years ago. I want to move forward and take you to the story of Yedidia Chayut and the officer that managed to save part of the family. You may have seen this on TV back in the States as well. This man was a shaliach in Uruguay. He made Aliyah to Israel with his family a few years ago. This is one of his kids. Another kid is over here on the right. Yedidia was the name of the son that was actually killed, Yedidia Chayut, together with another student of this rabbi, who was also the father in this case, that was trampled by the crowd. They were one of the 45, but a ray of light in the form of this Druze soldier, a Druze Israeli soldier, right? Not Jewish, Druze, it's a minority living in the Galilee and the Golan, managed somehow to save this father that was injured himself and his other son that was saved as well. And they're standing together.
אני נמצא על הרצפה.
You can say a lot of things about Israel and about the balagan, the mess, and about this idea of Yeh Beseder, it's going to be okay, don't worry. But in the end of the day, when bad things happen, when a tragedy, a civil tragedy like this happens, we don't just start going to blame each other, but first we try and help each other. And it doesn't matter if you're a Druze Israeli, an Arab Israeli, if you're religious or secular. My neighbors here from a very secular community went to the community of Haredi, a place called Tellstone near Jerusalem, and they put up a sign in front of their house, in front of the entrance to Tellstone. They said, "We're with you in happy times, and we're with you in painful times. We're with you together. We're brothers." Now, you wouldn't usually see those kinds of comments towards Haredim, towards Orthodox. I think a lot of good comes out in situations like this. This is another officer, this time an Arab Israeli officer from northern Israel, that saved this man, a religious Haredi man. He literally pulled him out. And when Gil Alon, the man on the left, basically said to the officer, "Do you remember, what did I look like when you pulled me out of all those people?" He said, "You looked like you were dead. You literally looked like you were dead. And somehow you came back to life." So you have all these stories coming out right now. But I think one of the things that really impressed me was how not only Chabad, hours after this tragedy, were setting up food and places for rest for people leaving Meron. The 100,000 people that left were in trauma. Many of them couldn't just get home because the buses, it was all messed up. It was a terrible night between Thursday and Friday. And they were setting up food and a place for rest for people, but they weren't the only ones. In the newspaper the next day on Friday, I really thought that it was amazing to see that the Arab villages near Meron, like a village called Tamra, set up this buffet food for people, offering people to come into their homes. These are Arab Israelis, citizens of Israel, going up to ultra-Orthodox, what they usually have no reaction, connection to in everyday life, but they need them because they're human beings. And that's when you see what people are really like, handing out a hand to literally help you out, like the officers did, but also to hand some food and to help people get through the day and maybe get back home after this terrible tragedy. On Friday and on Sunday, there was giving blood all over Israel. One of the problems when there's a lot of people that are injured and it's not clear if the 150 injured are going to need blood transfusions and all that, people in Tel Aviv, the very secular Tel Aviv, and people in the center of Jerusalem were giving blood. The mayor of Tel Aviv, Huldai, came to give blood himself. As a secular left-wing politician, he was standing there, and they made a statement out to the media saying, "Thank you, we don't need any more blood. Thank you, Israel, for helping so much, for reaching out for these people that were in this tragedy." But that's enough. So everybody tried to help in the way that they actually could. By Sunday, there was a decision made that Israel would go into an official day of mourning. This is the Kotel, and the Kotel with the flag down at half-mast. That doesn't happen a lot. The rabbi mentioned that it happened in 1997 when 73 soldiers were killed when those two helicopters collided. I don't know if you remember that, a terrible accident. I think both of these accidents are things that shouldn't have happened. Is it really an accident what happened in Meron, or is it something that we should have expected and we could have done better? Whether it means the politicians or the police or the leaders of the Haredim, right? In any case, there was a feeling that this is something different. 45 people from our own and 6 of them from the US. I think it's much more than that if you talk about Argentina and Canada. People that lost their life really in the happiest day of the year for them for no reason, no good reason. This should not have happened. And I want you to look at the young faces especially, but also at the teachers, the rabbis, the younger kids that lost their lives in this occasion. A bunch of different stories in the media about kids getting a prize from their rabbi to go up to Meron. It was a prize. The best student of the class was chosen to go with the rabbi up to Meron, to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai. And this is Donnie Morris, who was studying in a yeshiva year in Israel. His chaverim, his fellow students came to the funeral on Sunday. By the way, they stopped in the pathological center near Tel Aviv in a place called Abu Kabir. They tried to identify all the bodies, but they told the chief rabbi of Israel, told the doctors there, the pathologists, not to continue identifying the bodies during Shabbat because it's not pikuach nefesh, and it would offend the Haredis who lost someone from their own family. So it took until Motzei Shabbos, until all the 45 families got the information about their kids, their husbands, someone from their family that was killed in the tragedy. This is the funeral of Donnie from Teaneck, New Jersey. And at the end of the funeral, you could see his friends standing up and singing a song that talks about asking God for mercy, for rachamim, rachem, right? Asking God for mercy, and it's a song you probably have heard of and know the melody, Achenu. Achenu kol beit Yisrael, our brothers, the people of Israel, that are in bad times. God should bring them out from darkness into light and help them out. So let's take a moment to listen to this. The friends of Donnie Morris from Teaneck, right after the funeral. Those Aramaic words saying, now, we want to come out into the light from these dark times, from these tragedies. Help us with this, asking God after the funeral of Donnie Morris, one of the 45, a young guy, 19 years old, a yeshiva bachar that studied in Israel. And this is Yaron London, a totally different other perspective that I want to mention as well, because I want to mention the tough issues in Israeli society too. The way Rabbi Elliott wrote about this, when he tried to describe the session we were thinking together, we're really not only talking about Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. We're really not only talking about this tradition of going to tzaddikim. We're talking about the people of Israel today. What does our society look like? What do people think about the Haredim? What do people think about going up to graves of tzaddikim? So, and how do people react in times of tragedy? So we saw the Arab Israelis and the Druze officers helping, rescuing, giving food, giving shelter. But there's also another side. This is a man called Yaron London that many people give a lot of respect to in Israeli society. He's big in the Israeli media. And he basically says the following: I'm not sad. It's like another tragedy in China for me, you know? I don't feel connected to these people. They're not my people. He's talking about Haredi, ultra-Orthodox. Now, Yaron London is Israeli. He lived here his entire life. He's one of our most important, for many years, most important people from our media. And he writes this on Facebook. And many people on Facebook, on the media, come back at him and say, how can you say this? You know, these are our Am Yisrael. You can disagree with them, but it's terrible that you say this. One of the other newspaper men said you should put a plaster on his mouth and shut his mouth because he doesn't know what he's saying. But you know what? Yaron London says in the end, after apologizing if he offended someone, he basically says, look, I'm saying something that a lot of Israelis are not saying out loud. So that's very interesting. I think that he is probably true that there are people thinking this, but to say it out loud, that was a very dramatic statement, especially right after people just lost their lives. How could you? But, you know, this is also a voice in Israeli society, maybe a smaller one, definitely a smaller one. It's not like the 2,000 portions of blood that were given all over Israel and Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And this is the mayor of Tel Aviv I mentioned before. It's a totally different approach to the situation, saying they're not my people. They live in the same country, but I don't connect to them. But I would say, if I had to assess this, that the vast majority really, you know, almost everyone, except a very small minority, felt the power of this Israeli brotherhood. Now, you may remember that a few weeks ago, we had a session for Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, and one of the things I mentioned that the theme this year was going, focusing on Israeli brotherhood. Whether you're a Druze or a Haredi or right wing or left wing or a Muslim or a Christian, it doesn't matter. You're all Israeli, and you help each other when you need each other. You celebrate together and you hurt together. And this is that sign I was mentioning before that actually says together in pain, Yachad Beke'ev, together in hope, Yachad Betikva, right in front of Telstone, which is that ultra-Orthodox community right by my house. And it was a powerful story in the news because you don't usually see this. The mayor of that little neighborhood of Telstone tried to find the people, his neighbors from the neighboring community who put this up, but they were already gone. But this was a secular community saying it doesn't matter. We're all Jewish. We're all Israeli. We all live here and we support you. We're not judging anybody right now. We're with you to help. We're with you to hurt together with you, which for me was actually a very moving thing to hear. This singer is a man called Gershi Gestetner. Maybe you heard about him in the news, the man on the right in the US. He comes from Canada. He came especially for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yohai and for Lag BaOmer. He came to sing, he came to be happy, he came to celebrate, maybe to say thank you to the tzaddik, to make that connection, a connection of generations at the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai tomb. And he was one of those people that was trampled. Unfortunately, his family could not make it in time for the funeral. His family did not make it in time for the funeral.
Moshe, they're sitting Shiva in Monsey, New York, even till tomorrow. So,
and that's amazing. And I think the amazing thing, I'm sure you heard about this as well, is how literally hundreds, if not thousands, of Israelis, Haredi, right, ultra-Orthodox, or just regular religious or traditional or secular, they came to the funeral because there was a thing in the news basically saying, hey, this man doesn't have his family here, right? We have to support him. And they went and supported him, and the funeral was transmitted over Zoom. And yes, you see Zoom with all the balagan sometimes. It gets cut off, so it's not the same thing. But I think that feeling of standing there for each other in the moments that we need each other was very, very powerful. Before we continue to one last part, I would just love to have you hear one of his famous songs, again, about asking God for mercy on his people, the people of Israel. Rachem. Okay, so he's the man on the right, the younger guy. Let's listen to a little bit of this music. Chamol al amecha. We're asking we're asking God to have mercy on His people, and that is Gershi Gestetner, Shiva, and Munsi, and all of Israel behind him, all of the people of Israel coming to his funeral at the cemetery in Yerushalayim. We started off today talking about this idea of Lag BaOmer, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the connection of Kabbalah, Rabbi Isaac Luria, to this idea of going to the tzaddikim, not only being inspired from their life, but asking them to bring up your prayers to the Shamayim, to God, right? To enhance your prayers. And this tradition continues all over the Jewish world, but especially these days in the Ukraine and Breslov and Uman, right? And the most important place, definitely in Israel, in the Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Unfortunately, this year, the big simcha turned into a big etzev, a big time of sorrow and of pain for our people. And in the end of the day, even in a day like this, maybe dafka in a day like this, where we don't have a government and people are arguing about politics and, oh, I don't connect to the Haredis, says one of those newspaper people. They're not for my people. We have to stand up very clearly and say, we're one people. We're one people. And the mosaic of the state of Israel is of the Jewish people and of the people of Israel that are also Muslim and Druze, and all of us live in this big pot, this big, this very small area, but this big mosaic is put together called the land of Israel. It's a challenge, and it's not a time to judge, and it's not a time to look at what's wrong with ultra-Orthodox and their leadership. Did they make a mistake, or the politicians or the police? I think it's a time to come together, and that's the message on our radio and on our TV. This has been a very difficult year. During COVID, there were two minorities in Israel, the Arab Israelis and the ultra-Orthodox. I don't know if it was like this in the States. It was very difficult trying to convince specific communities to take the vaccinations, right? Not only ultra-Orthodox, Arab Israelis, many secular people. There's been a lot of arguing and dispute. So we don't always have to agree, but we definitely need to remember to come together when it matters. And I feel personally, and this is on a personal note, one of the things that really bothers me, and I hope that we're going to take and prove this, is this idea that you can't just trust on Hashem. You cannot. Hashem doesn't want us to just trust on the miracle. If we know that something's not working, if we know that something's not organized, if we know that something can be dangerous to people, we really have to be strong to enforce it, not to bend rules. Israel has a lot of rules. It doesn't have enough enforcement. And I'm just hoping, again, I say this in the spirit of Yom HaAtzmaut that we just passed, that we are moving forward and we will learn how to live better together and remember with these reminders that we are one people in one state and one country. And also to keep improving, because this can't happen. This really shouldn't happen. It can't happen. And, of course, we send our condolences to the families and really to all of Am Yisrael that is thinking and focusing its prayers right now for the injured and for the families that lost their loved ones. So I would love to open it up to questions, comments.
Here's a
time that is
question Bonnie asked earlier, and we could just kind of rewind back. The whole idea of pilgrimage to graves, is something that the Bible frowns upon. She writes that there's no grave for Moses, precisely to prevent that phenomenon. I wonder if you could just offer some thoughts on this. She writes, why do Jewish leaders encourage their followers to do this grave worship? It I think rightly feels a little bit strange to us.
Right. And going back to what Bonnie, what you wrote, I was one of the ideas I actually wrote down to myself, when Moses is 120 years old, he goes up to Mount Nebo, he sees the land from across, but then the next pasuk in Deuteronomy and Dvarim, the end of the Torah, tells us that nobody knows where Moses was buried. Why does nobody know where he was buried? Well, he's buried in the Arvot Yericho, right? Or Arvot Moav, in the deserts of Moab, just in the area maybe of Jericho, in that area of the Jordan River. But maybe it's so that people don't go and idolize Moshe. Now, there was another Moshe in our history, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, Maimonides, that basically said very clearly in the book of Mishneh Torah, he said the following: you should respect the rabbis. You can go and, of course, have a respectful burial, but don't continue going back there. Don't have hilulot. Don't make a whole big hilula out of the yortzeit of a famous rabbi. People come to Maimonides' grave till this day. I'm not sure he would be so happy about this, but this has become a tradition. When did this become a tradition? When did Rashbi and other graves in the area of the Galilee become a bigger tradition? It happened more and more in the times of the golden age of Tzfat, even before that, but during the golden age of Tzfat in the 16th century, Rabbi Isaac Luria said exactly the opposite from Maimonides. He basically said that there is a chokhmah, there is an idea of connecting with the tzaddik, of asking him to pray for us, to elevate our prayers towards God. He and Rabbi Chaim Vital and the son of Rabbi Chaim Vital from Tzfat wrote special prayers for different tzaddikim. So there was a dispute in Jewish thought throughout the ages if this is something that is frowned upon and we should not do. And then you have Rabbi Isaac Luria from the 16th century that is not saying this is wrong. He's saying with specific rabbis, you should, he's not saying have a hilula, but he's saying you can make that connection. You can ask Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and other great rabbis for help with prayers with God. So it's very interesting because I would say a big part of the Israeli society, just like you said, Bonnie, they don't get this. They don't get this. Why do we have graves of people up in the Galilee when we don't have even any proof that they're actually buried there? All these rabbis, all these Tanaim from the time of the Mishnah, why are you going up there? And then they ask you to buy a ticket to buy some holy water as the next step. Or I'm saying this not in a cynical way, but to show you a big part of Israeli society doesn't give this so much respect. Saying that, when you talk about Moroccan Jews, Tunisian Jews, this is part of the culture in North Africa. When I go with groups to Morocco, there's Israeli group specifically, all they do is they go to the Kvarim, to the tombs of tzaddikim, and they have a hilula in the yortzeit of the tzaddik, and they pray in front of the grave, and they lie down on the grave to make a physical connection, to be online with the tzaddik, and through that with God. So it's an interesting idea in Judaism. There's definitely two parts even today for this and against this, even within the rabbis. There's no one idea of what should or shouldn't be done. So
I want to ask you another question, just in terms of the whole concept of Haredi culture really colliding with Israeli culture and yielding some very interesting things. We're all big fans of shtisel here in the United States. We know that the actors are not Haredi, but actually there are a couple. Shuli Rand is in there; he's Haredi. and they have to know the producers, directors, etc. So there seems to be a phenomenon of I want to call it efflorescence of culture based on the collision of Haredi culture and regular Israeli culture. I don't know if you come into contact with it yourself, in little ways, big ways. I think that this moment is an explosion of that contact. And maybe you can take a moment on this.
Yeah, 100%. I was just thinking about, you call it an explosion, and hopefully it will be an explosion of light after these terrible times right now, making more connections. But just in regard of shtisel and having a program about Haredi community on TV, A, I love the show. B, I think it does a lot of great things for Am Yisrael as a whole, and specifically for the Haredi community. But, because then Chiloni, non-religious, suddenly see, everybody's a human being. Everybody's looking for someone to love, for a good place to eat, taking care of your kids, this and that, the everyday life kind of things. And it brings people together, to pull that down, the separation between the different communities. But I want to tell you that a few weeks ago, I was walking a part of the Israel Trail. It's a very long trail. I did a little part of it by Jerusalem. I met a few Haredi guys in their 20s, and I said to them, by the way, did you hear about a show called Shtisel? It's like everybody's talking about it in the Chiloni, in the non-religious world, and national religious. Everybody's talking about it. Amazing show, very well done. Tells the story of Akiva, who's the hero, this, from the Haredi world of Jerusalem. They said, what do you mean Shtisel? What is that exactly? They've never heard about it. So it's amazing how the media is part of our life. But for Haredim, a lot of the terms that we're talking, and at least Haredim here in Israel, they're not reading the same newspapers. They're not listening to the radio. They don't have smartphones. They asked me to take their picture at the spring I was at because their phone cannot take pictures. Do you remember those times that your phone cannot take a picture? A regular phone, wow, right? So I'm saying these are two different worlds. And I think shows like Shtisel, I think bring the people together. And I know there's a lot of talk after watching the show about Israeli society and relationship between Haredim and non-Haredim. Another big thing that's happening in Israel right now, and Rabbi, there's just one little comment. There's a show, I don't know if it's on in the States yet, it's called The New Jew. Hayudia Chadash.
It hasn't been able to be broadcast.
You haven't seen it, you have to see it. Put it on your list. The New Jew is 4 parts of a guy called Moshe Samuels walked through North America, which is in the size of the population of Jews in the state of Israel, right? The Golden Medina, the US, with such a rich Jewish life, is being explored by an Israeli that now lives in the US. And he goes to a Reform synagogue, a conservative synagogue, a Haredi synagogue, and he explores Judaism in America. Now, okay, that's not a big deal. You probably have seen these things. For Israelis, they think this is like a wow. Everybody's talking about it. What do you mean? So men can pray with women, and Haredi women. There's a Haredi woman from Brooklyn who's a judge, right? Did you hear about? About her maybe?
Yeah.
And how could this be? And so they're learning about this other huge community of Jews in the world in North America. There's a birthright program to Israel where you get a free trip to Israel to come to Israel and explore Israelis and the state. How about having a birthright of Israelis coming to America to learn about 5 million Jews living there? Because in the end of the day, we're brothers. It's one people. It's just amazing. The New Jew. Watch that show, The New Jew.
Part of the reason why we want you, we invite you all the time is to really try and make that connection. I know that, is there anybody has anything else they want to say, ask? I know we're a little over, but I don't want to dominate here. You want to put it in the chat or just kind of unmute yourself and shout?
I put something on chat to Moshe.
Yeah.
Did you want to answer that, or should I?
Yeah. I just saw it right now. This is Mark, right?
Yes.
So you're talking about our political system and suggesting that there should definitely be a change if it's not working for 4 times straight. We're electing parties, and the leader of that party, is trying to form a government, and it's not working for 4 times. there should be a change. And I think a lot of Israelis are saying that right now. They're saying we're tired. We just want a prime minister. And we want a prime minister that we can trust, and we want a government, and we want a Knesset with 120 members. And we don't want to go in 5 or 6 months to a fifth election and waste another billion shekels. So I have to say, personally, I agree with you 100%. I think there's something wrong with the system, but there's a lot going on in Israel. It's the system, and it's not being able to form a government 4 times straight. That probably says something not only about the system, but also about the different parties. So I couldn't agree more. I think there's a problem. There's a problem, and we're, as you said, Rabbi, there's an explosion right now with talking about Haredi and talking about Lag BaOmer and talking about Israeli society. There's an explosion talking about how do we want our country to look? What does the political system need to be like? Who are going to be our leaders? What kind of system are we going to live in? We're only 73 years old. We're still trying to figure it out, and hopefully things will continue changing for the better. So,
is there any other question on your chat, Moshe, or anybody else want to say?
No, that's it.
All right. I don't want to leave it there, but we're out of time, and this has been just really extraordinary. I think there's a lot of emotion that we have after this event, a lot of confusion and where do we go, what do we do, and you were the best person to turn to, Moshe, as always. You are our madrich, and you take us on the tour. We're very, very fortunate to have you, and we want to thank you. Wish you all the best, and we look forward to seeing you again. Not under difficult circumstances. We'll get you for good circumstances too.
Right, and Rabbi and everyone, I apologize about the Zoom issues. It was probably on my side. I'm not sure what happened. So I'm sorry if it was a little bit in and out. Kind of threw me off for a moment, but I'm glad we met.
Thank you, Moshe.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
Chazak v'yamatz.
Yom Tov, everybody. Yom Tov.
Thank you.